Hi, World History. This is Miss Corey. Welcome to U10-L2 Basics of the Renaissance. Learning targets. Identify major intellectual, scientific, and/or religious developments of the first global age and their influence today. All right, you're going to watch this Ed puzzle, answer the questions. Questions I'll ask you during the video today will be in blue text. You will answer those questions directly onto the Ed puzzle. If you have any questions, please let your teacher know. We are more than happy to help you out. All right, first question for you. When you hear the words the Renaissance, what do you think of? So you may think of Renaissance festivals, which we have all over the country, but we do have one here right in Minnesota, which is actually a picture of what the Minnesota one looks like. You might think of ladies in their royalty dresses. You may think of art. There is a lot of art that goes on during the Renaissance. A lot of it is religious art as well. We'll talk about that today and also throughout this unit. You might think of famous things like the David. You might think of the Mona Lisa. You might also think of musicians and their lutes during this time. You may also think of architecture. We will talk a little bit about architecture when we watch the Medici family videos. And then we also might think of famous scientists such as Leonardo da Vinci. All right, so here's our timeline. If you're new to us this semester, you probably have never seen this timeline before, obviously. But I've used it a little bit now through semester one. So we talked about the Middle Ages right at the end of semester one. Now we're going into the Renaissance era. So you will see that there's a lot of overlap between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance in Europe. So the Middle Ages was from about 500 to 1500 CE, as the Renaissance is the late 1200s to the early 1600s CE. And I'll explain why there is a lot of overlap during this time. Also to note, during this time is a lot of the start of exploring of North and South America. So for example, Ponce de Leon lands in Florida in 1503. So that's during the Renaissance period in Europe. And Jamestown, Virginia is founded in 1607. So right at the end of the Renaissance era. All right, so Europe did not change to the Renaissance era in one day. It's not like all of a sudden everyone woke up and was like, hey, you know what? We're in the Renaissance era. No, that did not happen. It was slowly over time. So we will learn that the Renaissance started in Florence, Italy, which is about right here. From Florence, Italy, these ideas of the Renaissance would spread throughout Europe. So, of course, it would start in Southern Europe. It would spread into more Central Europe and then up to Northern Europe. It also would affect parts of North Africa and the Middle East as well. All right, so what is the Renaissance? The Renaissance literally means rebirth. It was from the late 1200s to the early 1600s. This is where scholars became very interested in the studies of ancient Greek and Roman people. So, any Greek and Roman text, art, philosophy, and architecture, these Renaissance people wanted to have. They wanted to study it. During the Middle Ages, there was very little interest in Roman and Greek texts due to the focus on Christianity. We talked about how the Roman Catholic Church had significant power. Everything was pretty much Christianity, Christianity, Christianity during Europe. Now, people in the Renaissance are kind of breaking away from that and looking back to the past of what the Roman and Greeks had. During this time, there's also new discoveries in science. There's new forms of art and literature. There's new religious branches. We'll talk about Martin Luther a little bit later on, and new political ideas. So we talked about in the Middle Ages that there is a lot of like peasantry. We talked about peasants and how horrible their life was in serfdom. Now, during the Renaissance, Europe is going to fade away from the feudalism. They're going to fade away from having peasants into new political societies. There's also the exploration of new lands by Europeans. So that is North and South America. So where did it all begin? Like I said before, it started in Florence, Italy, which is right up here in northern Italy. It was a very prosperous city. It was the big way it got rich was because of cloth making, but also paper making, glass blowing, ceramics, and sugar refining. So, a new economic class emerged during this time, and that was merchants and bankers. So, merchants and bankers were upper middle to wealthy class. We'll talk more about them when we talk about the Medici family in U10-L5 and L6. They were able to afford luxuries and invest in public works. So, for example, Uh, they would find text and they would then hire scholars to study these ancient Roman and Greek artifacts. They would also hire artists, modern day artists, to make art for them for their private homes. So, good question is, everyone in European Renaissance was obsessed with getting these Greek and Roman texts, but where did they get them? Did they just dig them out of the ground? No, actually, they have been known to humans ever since they were created. So between 711 to 1492, Arab caliphates controlled Spain. So we talked about Islam in North Africa back in Unit 7. Um, and we talked about how they controlled a little bit parts of Spain. So these Arab caliphates collected ancient texts and studies at their schools. So if you remember back in Unit 7, we talked about how there was quite a few universities in Africa. These texts would include Plato and Aristotle's work. So we talked about them way back during Alexander the Great. Also, Greek texts on medicines, math, and geography, and Arab texts on Muslim created scientific documents and philosophies as well. So, like I said, uh, during 711 to 1492, Arab caliphates controlled Spain. Arab caliphates of Spain allowed all religions to live under them. So it was really a safe haven for many different populations, but definitely the Jewish population. So Jewish scholars would transcribe these texts from Arabic to more common European languages. Then we have universities. So we talked about universities back in Unit 7 and how there was quite a few that popped up in Africa during the Middle Ages, but now it's Europe's turn. So between 1300 and 1500, 60 universities were founded across Europe. They also created teacher guilds, which set standards to what it meant to teach and also to be a student at the university. So, not just anyone could attend university or get a degree from the university. There were standards also to create curriculum and final tests for degrees. And the longer time that someone was school, they could get like better and better degrees. So, kind of the equivalent to like a master's degree or a doctorate degree like we have today. Here's an example of one of those universities. This is the University of St. Andrew in Scotland, which was founded back in 1413. That's a long time ago. We also have new sciences during this time. So, Copernicus, he argued that the sun was in the center of the solar system. So, prior to this, the Catholic Church believed that the Earth was in the center of the solar system. So the Catholic Church thought, oh, that's the Earth. The sun rotates around the Earth, and then Mars rotates around the Earth. And Mars just does this cute little loop-de-loop. Copernicus argued that the sun was in the center of the solar system, and then Earth and Mars rotated around the sun. Copernicus's idea was heliocentrism, which meant that the sun is in the center. And this was condemned by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church did not like to admit they were wrong during this time. We also have Galileo. So he did mathematical equations such as speed and velocity, gravity and free fall, the principle of relativity, inertia, and projectile motion. We also have Kepler. He figured out the calculations for the law of planetary motion. All right. Next, we have Renaissance man and woman. So, this is actually going to be a really important part for your summative. So, if you're kind of tuning out right now, tune back in because this has to do with your summative. So, a Renaissance man or woman is someone who excelled in different areas of knowledge and skills, such as art, science, philosophy, and literature. They're not just experts in one field, but rather had a broad range of abilities. And these individuals sought to fulfill their human potential and contribute meaningfully to society, meaning that they had these skills and knowledge, and instead of keeping it to themselves, they went and tried to make the world better, pretty much. So, a Renaissance man, that is the ideal characteristics of a man in Europe during the Renaissance. Most of these characteristics came from a book called The Courtier, and that is to create art, to be excellent in many academic fields, to be charming, to be witty, to be well educated, to dance, to sing, to play music, to write poetry, to be skilled horse rider, wrestler, and swordsman. Then you have the Renaissance woman. So that's the ideal characteristics of a woman in Europe during the Renaissance. They were to be well educated in Greek and Roman art and literature, to be charming, which is like polite and likable, to inspire art, either by funding it or being a model, but not to create art. No, women were very frowned upon to create art during the Renaissance, and also to have very little influence over politics. So one of the kind of the cool exceptions to a Renaissance woman was this lady here. Her name is Isabella d'Este, and she was part of a ruling family in the city-state of Ferrara in Italy. So this is northern Italy. It's right here. She married a man who ruled Mantua, which is right here. And she employed a lot of Renaissance artists. Together, they had a major art collection. When her husband was captured at war, she actually ruled over Mantua and saved him from capture. So she did actually have political power. But again, most women did not have that chance in life during the Renaissance. Now, let's talk about the Roman Catholic Church at this time, because we focused a lot about that during the Middle Ages, so we got to talk about it now too during the Renaissance. So the church was secular, meaning the Catholic Church had considerable power in politics as well as religion. They influenced politicians with support from the church. They influenced rich with offering powerful positions in the church. We talked about this, it's called simony, and also money to raise armies, repair roads, and help the poor. So during the Renaissance, scientific studies became less secular. These scientists ended up questioning religious beliefs and teachings of the church. During the Middle Ages, people just accepted the unknowns as working of gods. They didn't really ever question the church and what it was saying. But these scientists had a rise in scientific method, and knowledge started solving the unknowns. So there was then the separation of science and church. Also, thanks to Protestantism, church's power in simony crumbled. A Protestant is a member of a Christian church founded on the principle of Reformation. You will learn more about this in U10-L2. And then Martin Luther, who is this dude right here, he was the founder of the Protestant movement and was against simony and corruption of the church and politics. So again, you will learn a lot more about him in just a few lessons. So what will we learn this unit? That's a great question. We will learn about the art of the Renaissance, the Lutheran Reformation, the Medici family, who was this very powerful family during Renaissance Italy. Renaissance women restored. That is about a rare woman artist during the Renaissance. And then we have our summative. So next up, you're going to do U10-L3, Art of the Renaissance. This is a video from Rick Steves. He has PBS programs. He has traveled all over Europe, parts of Africa, the Middle East, oh man, a long time, probably early 2000s, something like that. You can catch a show on PBS, which is Channel 2. And in this video, he goes through some of the most famous art pieces of the Renaissance. So this video is an Edpuzzle. You're going to watch the video and answer the questions. I will be grading you on what questions you get right or wrong, by the way, so make sure you pay attention. Then the Medici family. So that is the last name of a very powerful family. They ruled Florence, Italy from 1400s to the 1700s. They were made their wealth through banking. They were a patron of the arts. You're going to hear the word patron quite a bit. What a patron means is a wealthy supporter of the arts, and they would pay money to an artist to make art. And we'll learn more about the Medici family in lessons 5 and 6. All right, another good thing kind of just to know during this time, since there was so much art that was based on religion, there's going to be a lot of biblical stories that is seen through this art. I just want to go through some of the basic details just so, like, if you're unfamiliar with the stories, you kind of have an idea of what the art is about. So David and Goliath is the first one. That is a biblical story from the Bible. It's from the book of Samuel, which is in the Old Testament. So Goliath was a large soldier. David was a young shepherd, and also an Israelite, who were the people who would then become the Jews. Goliath was in an army to conquer the Israelites, and David battled Goliath with a slingshot and killed Goliath. David would then go on to be the king of Israel. I left out a bunch of details. The story really varies too on what source and interpretations you read. You also have Mary and Jesus. So we talked about Christianity back in our Rome unit. So we talked about how Mary was the mom of Jesus. Jesus is what Christians believe to be the Son of God and the Messiah or the Savior. In Renaissance art, you will see Mary mentioned as the Madonna. And when I say Madonna, I am not talking about the 1980s singer. It literally just means Mary. And this is when Mary is depicted in art. She is called the Madonna. She can be depicted with or without Jesus, but a lot of the time you will see her with Jesus. And then we also have John the Baptist. He appears a lot in Renaissance art. He is Jesus's cousin and a Jewish preacher. He's often depicted in art alongside Jesus. The Last Supper, that is another biblical story from Christianity. That is where Jesus was a wanted man for treason by the Roman Empire. Before Jesus' arrest, he and his 12 followers, called the 12 Apostles, had dinner. At the dinner, Jesus said that one of the apostles would betray him by giving the Roman Empire Jesus' location. That apostle ended up being Judas. He was the one who betrayed Jesus for money. Crucifixion, that's another really big Christian theme in art. That is when someone is killed by being nailed to a wooden cross. And Jesus was not the only one to ever be crucified. It was actually a very common practice with the Persian Empire and the Roman Empire. Jesus was killed by crucifixion. And you will also see this scene here a lot. It's called a pieta. And that is when art depicts Mary holding Jesus after he is dead and taken down from the cross. Okay, whew, that was a lot, I know. So next up, you're going to do U10-L3, Art of the Renaissance, then U10-L4, Lutheran Reformation Reading and Quiz. You're going to read the reading first and then take the quiz. They're two separate links, but you'll see them. They're in order on the Schoology page. Then you'll do U10-L5, the Medici Part 1. That is a PBS documentary. It's an ed puzzle. I will be grading you on what questions you get right or wrong. It is 5 questions per video. Then we have the Medici Part 2, which is the same thing as Part 1. And the U10-L7, The Renaissance Woman Restored, that is a PBS special about restoring painting of Platua Nelli, who is a rare woman Renaissance painter. So you will learn more about her. And then we have the Unit 2 summative, which I want to go through real quick. So the Unit 2 summative is called the Renaissance Person Summative. So directions. You will fill out the Unit 10 Renaissance Person Summative template, which will be posted on Schoology. It will look like this. So the template is kind of the gray outline with kind of a red center. This is for next week, by the way. You don't have access to it quite yet. And each of the slides have different requirements. You can find this information in the speaker notes of each slide as well as below. So on slide number 1, you're going to type your name, so your first and your last name. I know, very difficult. You actually get a point for doing that, just FYI. Okay, so that's slide number 1. Slide number 2, you're going to include the following information. Explain 3 ways that art and or technology influenced the Renaissance. Be as specific as you can. You're going to get that information from lessons 2, 3, 5, and 6, and also a picture pertaining to the slide. Slide number 3, you're going to include the following information. Explain 2 pieces of information of why Platua Nelli's work is important or unique. You're going to get all that information from lesson 7 and a picture. And then for slide number 4, you're going to include the following information. Explain 2 pieces of information of why Martin Luther went against the Catholic Church. And explain 1 piece of information of the lasting effects of the Lutheran Reformation. And a picture. All right, so I know we just talked about the Renaissance man and woman just a few minutes ago, but again, here's the definition for it because it's an important part for your summative. So a Renaissance man or woman is someone who excelled in many different areas of knowledge and skills such as art, science, philosophy, and literature. They were not just experts in one field, but rather had a broad range of abilities. Examples of these fields include creating art, excellent in many academic fields, charming, witty, well-educated, dancing, playing music, write poetry, skilled horse rider, wrestler, swordsman, and many more. Note that a person did not need to be skilled in all of these fields. That would be pretty excessive. These are just some of the common examples. A Renaissance man or woman then cultivates a wide range of knowledge and skills. These individuals sought to fulfill their human potential and contribute meaningfully to society. So you are going to think and choose of one modern day person you think would be a modern day Renaissance man or woman. The person you choose must have been alive anytime between 1900 and today, hence they have to be kind of modern. And then with slide number 5, you are going to write your name of your modern day Renaissance person at the top of the page, and then include the following information. 3 pieces of information of why you think this person should be considered a modern day Renaissance person. So for example, think of what the person has accomplished, what skills they have, what are they known for, how they interact with other people, and also make sure you put a picture of the person. Then you're going to proofread your slideshow. Make sure you got all the information and then submit it to Schoology. Here's some of my tips. So, can't think of a modern day Renaissance person? Think of athletes, musicians, artists, actors, scholars, and even people in your own life. And no, you can't do yourself or the person that I do in my example. Okay, got to be different. If you still can't think of anybody, email me. I'm more than happy to help you out. All information for slides 2, 3, and 4 must come from the lessons in Unit 10. No outside sources are allowed. This is including AI. Any use of outside source or AI will result in points redacted or a permanent 0. Feel free to change out the background of the slideshow if you like. I know some of you like to do that, which is totally cool with me. If you have any questions or comments, please let us know. We are happy to help you. You also have my example here. I know a lot of you like to look at examples, so if that helps you, there's my example. Alrighty, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. Again, if you have any questions, do let us know. Bye.